Welcome back to Apexoraz. We're continuing our deep dive series into Arthur Schopenhauer's The Wisdom of Life. Today we're tackling Section 8. It's titled The Gnostics.
Right. And while the title sounds maybe historical, Schopenhauer's using it to get at something quite fundamental about how we think.
Exactly. He kicks off by pointing straight at this huge problem, doesn't he?
He really does. This massive contradiction he sees.
Well,
the idea of a world created by a being that's supposed to be all-powerful, all-good, all-wise.
Okay.
And then the actual world we live in, which seems, frankly, full of problems. Suffering, imperfection, it just doesn't seem to match up.
Right. The perfect source versus the, let's say, less than perfect result. It's a classic theological and philosophical puzzle.
A huge one. And Schopenhauer then looks at how some older philosophies tried to wrestle with this, specifically the Kabbalistic and Gnostic traditions.
So what was their approach to this mismatch?
Well, according to Schopenhauer, it was quite ingenious in a way. They introduced intermediaries.
Intermediaries, like go-betweens.
Exactly. They built up this whole complex chain of beings, sort of, between the ultimate divine source and the flawed world we actually experience.
Ah, I see. So the idea wasn't that the perfect creator messed up.
No. The fault wasn't placed at the very top.
It was shifted somewhere down the line.
Precisely. Schopenhauer uses the phrase, roll off the fault. You roll it off the sovereign, the divine creator.
Onto these ministers in the middle.
You got it. So, if the world's got issues, well, it's because of them, these intermediary forces or beings, not the original divine plan itself.
That's fascinating. And he even suggests this isn't entirely new, even for those systems. He mentions the myth of the fall.
Yeah, he sees a precursor there. He calls the fall myth a culminating point of Judaism. But the logic is similar, isn't it?
Oh, so.
Well, the fall introduces a step, human choice, human imperfection that explains the world's broken state without directly blaming the creator's initial design. It pushes the fall,
Yeah, okay, right. It creates a buffer. And these Gnostic systems, they really ran with this idea, creating quite elaborate structures.
Oh, absolutely. You get these hierarchies with specific names. Schopenhauer mentions the pleroma, the eons, the heil, the demiurgos.
Lots of specific terms.
Yeah, and he notes that, different Gnostic thinkers could basically add more layers if they wanted, making the chain longer and more complex.
To push the problem further away, perhaps?
That seems to be the implication, and this is where Schopenhauer makes another really interesting connection. He compares this whole strategy,
the intermediary strategy,
yes, to how some philosophers, particularly physiological philosophers, tried to explain the connection between the mind and the body.
Oh, right. The whole mind-body problem. How does immaterial thought connect with physical stuff?
Exactly. And people propose things like nervous fluidity or nervous ether or vital spirits.
Some kind of in-between substance, neither quite physical nor purely mental.
Yeah, something supposedly bridging that gap. Just like the eons were meant to bridge the gap between the perfect divine and the imperfect world.
So what's Schopenhauer's final take on both of these approaches, the Gnostic one and the physiological one?
His conclusion is pretty blunt. He says, in both cases, they are attempts to hide what they are not able to abolish.
Hide what they can abolish.
Meaning the fundamental contradiction, the core problem, whether it's the perfect creator and perfect world issue or the mind-body gap, it's still there. You haven't actually solved it.
It's obscured it. Made it harder to see by adding layers of complexity.
That's exactly his point. You build these elaborate systems, these intermediaries, not to fix the problem, but to make it less obvious, less jarring, to hide it.
Okay, so pulling this back to you, the listener, why spend time thinking about these, ancient Gnostic ideas or old physiological theories?
Because, Schopenhauer suggests, this isn't just ancient history. It reveals a really deep-seated human tendency.
A tendency
to, well, when we're faced with a really difficult contradiction, something uncomfortable that we can't easily resolve or accept, our instinct is often not to fix it, but to build complex explanations around it.
To kind of paper over the cracks.
Yeah, to make the uncomfortable truth less visible, maybe even hoping it'll go away if we don't look at it too directly. We try to hide what we can't abolish.
Okay, so we've walked through Schopenhauer's take on how these Gnostic and Kabbalistic systems used intermediaries, these sort of middlemen, to deal with that fundamental problem of existence.
And also how that mirrors, in a way, attempts to explain the mind-body connection. The core insight is really about this human drive, isn't it?
The drive to reconcile things that just don't seem to fit together.
Mm-hmm. Even if the reconciliation involves creating these really intricate systems that maybe don't solve the issue, but just hide it better.
So here's something for you to think about.
Mm.
Where else do you see this pattern playing out?
Yeah, maybe in history or in society today, or even just in how you personally think about difficult issues.
Where do we tend to introduce complexity, maybe unconsciously, to sort of hide what we're not quite able to abolish or resolve?
It's a powerful question Schopenhauer leaves us with.
Indeed. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into Schopenhauer's wisdom of life.